Today I want to introduce you to the new Effect 3D camera flight, which you can find in Video Vision and Stages 2024. There is an application example for this, and I will show a few more updates. I am in Video Vision 2024, and you can see the 3D camera flight in the object effects in the toolbox. Don't confuse it with the 2D camera pan, which I have already demonstrated in a video. I will link that again in the top right. Unlike the 2D camera pan effect, the 3D camera flight takes into account the object's position in 3D space while viewing each station. The camera rotates directly towards the image, so to speak, while with the smiley, the camera pan just moves over the area. If you add the effect, you already have 4 positions. Holder images in it, which are arranged differently in the 3-dimensional space, you mark the individual placeholders. You can see their position in the 3-dimensional space and also whether they are rotated, for example, and when playing back, the subject is then approached differently. The camera pans in the 3-dimensional space are rotated automatically. All objects in the effect are given the same length and each represent a panning station. Because the effect is relatively clear from the settings, the longer the standing time, the longer the individual stations, that is, images, are viewed and the faster the panning movement takes place. The zoom determines how far the camera moves to the content and thus also how much of the environment will be visible during a single frame viewing. Do you check the box next to use first object as environment? Does the first object represent the effect? There's no pan station. Without returning to the starting position, the camera moves directly from one image to the next. You can then simply drag your images onto the existing placeholders, and the images take over the position and layout of the placeholders. The placeholders can also be removed. To do this, simply highlight the image and press the remove button on the keyboard. You can change, move, or rotate the images in the layout. This is done for each image directly in the Layout Designer, where you can insert additional images. The initial placement is again seen in the Auto Designer. You can see how the images relate to each other, and helpful is also the manual input with which you can influence the position here in the 3D space. I'll play the example once. And immediately afterwards, I'll play the version without returning to the starting position. So you can directly use the placeholder images from the effect as a template for your photos or produce your own arrangement. I add the 3D camera flight effect once more and remove all placeholders. Then I insert my photos. I just take 7 pictures. I then mark these photos, then I go up here to Actions. There is a cool new feature in version 2024. Distribute objects randomly in space with the action. Objects can be assigned random positions, and thus the action is a fantastic addition to the 2D camera pan and also to the 3D camera flight. Now in this window I can mention which area my objects should be dispersed. For my example, the images should be randomly shifted horizontally. That means receive a random X value. They should also get a random Y position, and there should be a depth shift. The pictures should be tilted or turned slightly. Can be easily rotated or tilted. With Replace with Existing Path, Random positions and rotations are now calculated for the images, and the images are all distributed in 3D space. Of course, you can adjust the position of the images again. Make sure that the images don't overlap, or only slightly if possible. You could also have new random values calculated for individual images. I'm going to play it once. This is still relatively fast, but it could work for an intro. But I like to do it a little slower. To increase the duration of the effect and all internal images, I use intelligent scaling and set the value here to 50 seconds. Now you have considerably more time to look at the individual images. So, play around with the total duration of the effect, and also with the duration setting in the effect properties. Before I get to the topic of background, I'd like to show you that you can also use texts. I'm going to remove an image and grab a text object from the toolbox. I just put that into the effect. It's now a normal swivel station. I customize the text content, font size, and position of the text. It looks like this. First of all, the first object in the effect, that is the text, is visible. Then the camera pans to the first frame. And then from the first picture to the second picture. And so on. I think the text underlines this three-dimensional spatiality once again. So think about adding some text to the effect. Now, as promised, we come to the topic of background. Right now the background is just black because there's nothing there. As always, you can just put a picture behind it. I'm using this gradient from the static backgrounds here. If you play it, however, you can also see that it is static and does not bring any variety. This might even take away some of the three-dimensional effect. Maybe a little movement in the background works better. For example, by taking the gradient object and animating it with camera panning. You can also animate the color gradient directly in stages. Or you can revert to the new dynamic backgrounds. You can find the new dynamic backgrounds in the toolbox under the static backgrounds. I'll show you 2 or 3 of them. That's why I'm going to remove the blue background again, and then I'll reach for the chocolate here. This chocolate background consists of the animated noise and is packaged in a flexi layer, so that you can also fade in and out of it easily. In the properties of the noise, you will find various settings. You can change the color and how fast this background changes. And you can adjust the hardness. That's what I am doing. Instead of soft chocolate, there is now hard chocolate. Then I adjusted the duration so that the animation takes place over the entire duration of the object. And then we played back a nicely animated background. Subtitles by Stephanie Geigers, or here again another variant, namely topography. Thank you for watching. And here again a variation with the dynamic cells. Here the noise is also still in a gradient implementation that provides these colors. I'll remove a few of the colors and then it'll look like this. So take a closer look at these dynamic backgrounds and above all, choose what fits your images and your idea. I'm going to go back once more to the light blue background. Last but not least, I'm going to show you a variation with particles. They're also always a great way to liven up the background. I'm going to take this particle object out of the toolbox here and drag it under my background. And instead of using a particle of my own, I'm going to take this example object here and color it with an image effect. Fill color. And then I'll use a yellow and white here. Okay, you can see the change right away in the Layout Designer. I'm also going to adjust the duration of the particle object at the same time. Then I'll take a look at the mini templates. There are already some particle animations that you can use for your purposes. I'll take option 12 here. These templates are saved with certain settings and you don't have to change so much. Some settings can only be made in stages. I'm going to set the emitter to the entire range and increase the pre-glow time so that particles are immediately visible when the object starts. The particles now only fly in the background in front of our blue image, so they are not captured by the three-dimensional camera flight. I'll play it once. The background still has an overlay, but we see the particles moving in the background, and before that, our camera flight takes place. The effect is even more interesting, I think, if it also takes place in the three-dimensional camera flight effect, and thus even overlays images with particles. I copy my particle object with the Control key pressed. I drag the copied object directly into the three-dimensional camera flight, and now the particles are also part of our three-dimensional flight. I also activate the effect so the first object, that is our particles, is understood as an environment. I'll play it again in full screen in a moment. Have fun making it. And if you like the video, I'm happy about a thumbs up. Thank you. Subtitles commissioned by ZDF for Funk 2017. Subtitles commissioned by ZDF for Funk 2017.